My name is Michelle Ring-Hansen.
And my name's Joe Miller.
This segment of the training is an overview of the Mentor Toolkit. You can access the materials referenced in this training with the Participant Resources document located in the Trial Mentors user group.
You had some time to walk through the Mentor journal, your to-do list, some of your key learnings, but what I'd like to open the floor for are questions. Are there any questions that are circling around after our topics this morning that you'd like to bring to the floor for idea exchange or capturing some insight from the larger group?
So when I'm on our kind of our landing page site and I'm looking at workshops and whatnot, I see the Learning Design Lab, things along those lines. Are those great resources if I want to, like for instance, that Learning Design Lab, if I want to work that with my team and do that and facilitate those things with them as a large group? Are those things that you recommend?
So you're in the perfect space for these questions. We do have Mia here and Missy, who have been part of some of those wonderful resources available through our forward community. So Mia, did you want to take the floor with this?
I think. So the Learning Design Labs will actually be offered kind of like an online event. And then the toolkit will be available, I believe, once the online kind of like facilitated learning takes place. And I do know we're going through a little bit of a revision process with them, but that will be kind of a later launch after our UDL conference towards the end of October. So that's a great question, Amanda.
We're going to get an up-close look now at the mentor tools, and we're going to focus on those tools with descriptions that are going to be some of those entry points into your work. What I want to do is bring you back to the UDL Implementation Trials Toolkit, specifically the tools page. And what we're going to do is called a tool grab. On the tools page, you will have the opportunity to kind of explore the tools available just by scrolling through and looking what's there. Then we want you to select a tool that grabs your interest and dig a little deeper into it. I'm going to ask you to click on the tool, read through the information that's available, look at perhaps the format, the purpose of the tool, and then be ready to share that name of your tool in the chat. And what we're actually going to do when we get to that portion is we're going to do a waterfall. So it's a tool grab waterfall, and we'll look at all the tools that people kind of were resonating or grabbed their attention, and we'll see what we have in common and perhaps talk through a few of those tools that we see in the waterfall. Return to the UDL Implementation Trials Toolkit. Again, when you're at the top of the toolkit, you'll see the tab for tools. When you click on that space, there are a variety of tools listed that you will be able to scroll through. And we're going to ask you, again, pick something that piques your interest. Dig a little deeper into the tool, look at what's there, what it's used for, read through, and then be ready for our tool waterfall. I'm going to get ready for our waterfall. So whatever tool resonated with you that you dug in deeper, again, you can open the chat and type the tool name in. Just don't hit the enter button yet. We'll do that as the whole group and watch the waterfall happen. 3, 2, 1, go. It's a lot of data. Love the roadmap examples. Roadmap, great. So one of the things to keep in mind is the tools are there. as a standalone feature of the toolkit, but they are also embedded into the portions of the toolkit as well. So some of those tools that you looked at are really going to be anchors in our work as we move forward. So with that said, I'm turning the tables over to Jo, and she's going to help us look forward at our starting tools.
Yeah, so there's 3 big tools that really we want to bring your attention to at this beginning point in the implementation trials process. The first one is the trial roadmap, and I saw some of you had poked your curiosity in there in the tools in the toolkit, but that will really help you organize the entire calendar for the trials. One thing that we emphasize trying to get 3 trials in, but you'll notice that there's examples in there for also a 2 trial. So sometimes we work with schools or districts that they have a calendar that doesn't allow for the 2 to 3 week time frame for each of those data collection windows. So that's an important decision to make when you're working with the team, with the district leadership, to be able to coordinate all of the work that's happening within a district to make sure that the resources, the time, all of that is available to the teams to do their work and for you as a mentor. So that is one big starting tool that you're going to need to focus your attention on.
Jo, one other thing to think about is at the high school level, oftentimes we have teachers that want to be involved who have semester courses.
Yeah.
And in a semester course, it's really tough to get that 3 trial cycle in. So that is, again, why there's different versions of that roadmap.
That's right. So what I'd like to do is put you into breakout rooms now, and the trial roadmap that you feel like is going to work for you, open it up, make a copy, because there's a template for you to start envisioning what that schedule is going to look like for you as you work with your teams and as the teams are working together. I did put CISA 11 and CISA 9 together just because Kari had to leave. And I wanted to make sure that, Leah, you had somebody of kind of like district size perhaps, and some support in there to help you think through that original trial roadmap. So
yeah, and we really want you to talk through the example that you select. What do you see? What's happening between trials? What are some of those planning pieces? That will help you envision what your roadmap is going to look like for your teams.
And remember, the must-make decision for you with the leadership team is, are you going to go for the 3 trial schedule, or will you need time to get yourself started and that'll leave time for a 2 trial? So I'm going to open all rooms, and I will give you until about 12 minutes. So it'll be 10 to 1 before we come back. Back. So let's just share some of the things that you noticed and are wondering about with regard to the trial roadmap. Anybody can unmute and share their thought.
It was just the staff at Sheboygan Falls were helping me just get a sense of what our work is going to look like here because of truly being a semester course format. So, if my timeline has to be modified, what does that look like? Really, what does a trial period in length, what does that look like? And just making certain that I'm clearly defining the entire process for my team so they understand what the end goals are, whatever that schedule ends up being. So I really appreciated their help in that regard.
That's what we're here for, to support each other. And Jake, just so I bring it to your attention, if you didn't notice, in the tools section of the toolkit, there is a semesterized roadmap as well to help you out with that. Other wonderings or noticings do you have?
Our we have a fall, winter, spring assessment window for our students, and so we're kind of looking along the lines of a 3 trial template, and then we're doing some essential standards work right away in early October. So an end of October first trial date made a lot of sense. So we just started walking that out a little bit just now.
Okay, great. Thanks, James. Any other thoughts?
So we talked in our group about the number of data points collected in a trial.
Mm-hmm.
And just like what makes sense for, coaches and being able to get into classrooms and also being able to have conversations with teachers around their own data collection. So that was something that, the number 3 kind of comes to mind. I don't know if you can, Joe, maybe talk a little bit about why that particular number.
Yep. So Michelle is bringing up right now the baseline and trial descriptions, and you'll notice in the second paragraph, it says during each data collection windows, teachers collect 2 to 3 observations of each indicator student for each of the 4 preset engagement criteria, and the team defined set of 4 observable academic criteria within their chosen academic focus area. So as an example of that, at the end of a trial with 3 observations, each student would have had a total of 12 engagement data points and 12 academic data points. Now that is a ballpark, right? So you heard Terry talk about how sometimes it's not possible to collect every one of those. And we don't want folks that are engaging with us to stress over this idea of the data collection. We're not trying to write a PhD dissertation. We are trying to get some indications of whether what we're choosing to do is having an impact to students. We use our professional judgment in addition to those indicators that allow us to make better decisions. So it is not a validated scientific measure. It is how educators collect information with our professional and deep knowledge of students in our classrooms. And I know, Mia, in your case, you had outside people do observations for teachers while they were teaching. Other districts, the teachers themselves do the observations and collect the information on paper and then put it into the electronic tool afterwards. So that this can look lots of different ways, and there's support within that toolkit, but we're here to answer questions for you and with you anytime that you have questions about that as well.
I think the important thing to remember is that when you're setting up the criteria for the academic rubric, it's critical that it's observable criteria. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where some of the hiccups end up, is where the criteria isn't necessarily observable, and then teachers reach perhaps a bit of frustration in the data collection process.
That's a good point, Michelle. And we'll go over that when we look at the data tool more in depth in just a moment. Any other noticings or wonderings that you have about the trial roadmap? Okay. So in going back to those 3 important starting tools, the second one that we won't go into depth here is a meeting agenda. So we've developed a template that can help you have, your own planning roadmap to be able to be planful and work ahead so that you can be prepared for your teams. And so that's available to you. I recognize that many districts already have standard templates for meeting agendas. So again, this is a take and use as it works best for you. So we're going to go into the data tool in more depth, because this is really the tool that makes work come to life for the teachers that are on the teams. So a big decision, one of those must-make decisions, is which data tool are you going to use as a team in your district? And there's two options available. The first option, I'm going to go to the right side of this infographic here and talk about the free data collector and transformation directions that are available on the tools page of the toolkit. This is a Google Sheets spreadsheet where you do manual data. You put your data in, so it has a place to put your data in, and then you as a team will do manual data counts, calculations, and graphing. If you have somebody in your district who is good at being able to develop the efficiencies within Google Sheets through making formulas and all of that sort of thing, this is a great place to start to be able to create those efficiencies within your district. But we do provide the data transformation directions, and Google Sheet tips are in the UDL implementation trials toolkit for your help in defining the logic and how to process those observations. So the associated district costs with that free data tool is just creating those team copies. And then there's going to be some labor hours involved in either making that sheet efficient and automatic, or actually doing the data transformation itself by hand. And then in general, it's a manual data consolidation across schools and teams. So you'll have to put those pieces together to be able to get a larger view other than the team size. To be able to scale up the trials process, we invested in creating a web-based data collection and transformation tool. So this is called My Impact, and it's administered out of CISA 8. It's web-based, so you don't have to worry about having, sign into Google or anything like that. There's a sign-on. It automatically does all of the data counts, calculations, and graphing for you. It comes with a user manual, training videos, and a help ticket via the web portal. There is an associated district cost for grant partners. Right, this year, you will have special pricing of $500 district subscription fee, and it's unlimited users. So you could use this for things other than the UDL implementation trials. So there's unlimited users and unlimited teams, that sort of thing. So you can use it for whatever you think would be helpful. And then there's the associated labor costs with that is that there's setup time for that, but it's pretty quick. And then it automatically consolidates across schools and teams. I want to just show you the My Impact website really quickly so you can make a sound decision about what you want to be able to use. So let me just go in there really quickly. And we'll just look at the intro video. Welcome to My Impact, the data collection and transformation tool designed to enhance the study of classroom-level learning design and educator practice. My Impact transforms the way you record, analyze, and generate reports
on student engagement and academic progress observations. Let's take a tour right now.
When you sign into your MyImpact account, you will be navigated to the home page. The home page has several sections. All levels of users see the top filters, the center app function buttons, and the left app function menu. Only district, school, or team app administrator roles will see the admin menu on the left. The app function buttons and the left app function menu items will bring you to the same part of the app. The app function buttons are only available on the home page, but the left app function menu choices are available from all pages within the app. During the course of trials, teachers will collect observations of their students across 2 dimensions, engagement and academics. Teachers or teacher teams will identify up to 4 observable criteria in each dimension. Use the Manage Rubrics page to set up the academic and engagement rubrics for your team. Each teacher identifies students to observe in the classroom. MyImpact refers to these students as your indicator students. Indicator students should reflect the broadest range of your students' demographics, abilities, and current academic levels. Add students to your MyImpact roster with the Manage Students button or Students app menu choice. Teachers or observers collect observations of indicator student engagement and academic criteria during the baseline and trial time frames. Add observations to your MyImpact data by using the Data Collection button or app menu choice. Trial teams convene for a reflection meeting after the baseline or trial period to review their reports. View reports by using the View Reports button or Reports app menu choice. To learn more about the MyImpact trials process or how to use the app functions, check out the learning catalog or articles linked in the help page on the MyImpact website. If you don't find what you need to know there, contact us at myimpact@cesa8.org.
All right. So what I have at the bottom of the slide here is the infographic link, as well as the data collector sheet tool that you can take a look at. And I'm going to reveal now that I do have a link to the actual app and a spreadsheet of logins, so you can have an opportunity to be able to check that out and see, because you'll need to make a decision. We want to go into depth on that mentoring the academic rubric. As Michelle mentioned, this has been a place where there can be difficulties that teams experience if they don't develop an academic rubric that actually has observable criteria. So what we're looking for is 4 criteria under 1 key focus area that are observable. We want them to grow over the course of the entire year, and we want more of it. So we want that to move in a positive direction. It's not something that we want to get rid of. It's something that we want to grow. So we're going to do a bit of a gradual release here, and we'll show you an example of how this started out at Niagara. So our Niagara folks here, you're going to maybe see yourself and you knew you were being recorded, but here we are. And then we'll go through an opportunity for me to guide a group of volunteers through the role play. And just complete transparency, I didn't ask for any volunteers to begin with. So as you watch this process on the video, think about if you're willing to volunteer to play the part of a middle school math or science teacher on a team, putting UDL implementation trials in place. All right, so let's start out with this. The kind of focus that you can have, that it's something that your students will be doing the whole year. So a common one for people in ELA is key ideas and details, because it's a place that I've heard that students normally have deficits in, or they can improve a lot in.
and that there's really observable criteria in key ideas and details that teachers can attach to at every grade level, right? Being able to retell a story or to summarize a story can happen at kindergarten, it can happen at 3rd grade, it can happen at 5th grade.
Right, so we're wanting to stay within our content area, ELA, mathematics being separate, correct?
Yes, and if you don't have 2 teachers in the same content area, one thing that I've done is worked with teams who have decided to bundle some content areas that have a common ability to have a common academic focus, such as math and science. We can focus on interpreting data, or ELA and social studies, because we can focus on claim, evidence, reasoning writing. Okay, so it really is open to what the focus area that you think is going to benefit your students, that you think will be observable over the course of these 3 trials, and that you're likely to see a difference from trial to trial on your students, a positive shift. Likely to see, it's observable. This is going to require you to do a bunch of talking. Our next step is for you to think about that common academic focus. And I have a bunch of, actually, I don't, Terry prepared a bunch of different standards up here. So if you want to look at the like ELA anchor standards or the math practice standards, those are a great place to find those big overarching focuses that you would be likely doing many things over the course of the year attached to that. So look for that first, and then think about what are those observable criteria. Is my stuff in the way for you to see any of this? Okay. What are the observable criteria that I would be likely to see frequently in my classroom? I may have to design some activities for my students to do to make sure that I can see these things. Like it might be an adjustment to an assignment to make sure I can see that they're discerning a pattern or a structure. So I might have to make some adjustments to make sure that these things are observable over the course of the entire year. You may feel like you don't have enough information right now, but I'm just going to let you struggle with it for a moment, because that's usually how you build your understanding, is that initial struggle, and then the questions that you have during that struggle help me help you further.
Literacy standards, that covers all of us. It doesn't have to be necessarily the ELA standards or whatever. We can look at, and that's breaking apart like the idea that our students can gain knowledge from the internet or wherever they're researching and be able to make sure that it's credible information. I mean, that's pretty important too, whether it's you or whether it's us. So do we want to go with literacy? Okay.
So what are your initial thoughts here? What are you thinking?
We're looking at R8. We find that to be the most difficult across, but most inclusive. Absolutely. Standard. Yes. Yeah. For everyone.
For all our
Disciplines.
So the integration of knowledge and ideas would be that overarching focus then. Yeah. Okay. So when you look at the R7, R8, and R9, those all fall under integration of knowledge and ideas.
Yes.
Can you find 4 observable criteria within those 3 anchor standards that then could be used to tell whether students were making progress in integrating knowledge and ideas?
Like analyzing sources? Is that what you're...
Yeah, is that language in the...
Yeah.
It is, let me
Evaluate the argument.
Okay, so just quickly, after you watched that video, what did you notice? What stuck out to you when you watched that team do their first struggle in finding an academic focus and some observable criteria?
Well, they're kind of like their conversation about, does it have to be ELA and math, and then they're just the whole grouping process of it was the first thing that they kind of tackled.
Yeah, so James, I'll just tell you a little bit of a story of that day. It wasn't like we made teams and then told that team that they had to find their common academic focus area. We had an idea of what teams could be, and they started out there. But actually, people shifted around teams a little bit once they determined what their academic focus area was going to be and what those criteria would be, because some teachers found that I can't be with that group because this group is creating a academic focus area and criteria that's going to be more observable in my classroom. So that a little bit of fluidity during that process really allows teachers to engage authentically in the process of those implementation trials. What else did you notice?
Joe, I appreciated your coaching prompt about this is going to be a little bit of a struggle, and that it's going to feel a bit confusing because going through that process and folks maybe for the first time trying to identify common standards across different content areas, that definitely can be a new experience. So helping folks feel a little bit more comfortable with the uncomfortable was a really important prompt.
Thanks, Mia. Yeah, if you can prepare people for their discomfort, it helps them know that they're normal and it's part of the process. All right. Well, I'm wondering if we have any volunteers who are willing to play the part of the teachers on a middle school. You can choose whether you want to be math or science as you're on that team, and we'll struggle together to look at the mathematics standards, the math practice standards for middle school, and just organically go through the process of trying to identify an academic focus area and those criteria. So raise your hand if you're willing to be a volunteer, or unmute yourself. For those of you who have never done this, this is a good way for you to understand the discomfort that the folks that are going to be going through this with you will be going through.
Sure, I'll volunteer.
Thanks, Wendy.
I'm like Michelle. I have a hard time leaving space. Like I'm just like, I just want to jump in and be like, okay, fine, I volunteer.
Okay. So we have one for a team. We need one more. I am a volunteer, just so you know. So
there's a CISA 8 district in the room too, or in the house, right?
there is. They've already gone through this process though. All right, can I tap into, let's see. I'm going to tap into Melissa and see if she's available.
I'm here.
All right, Melissa.
Say,
if I mute
Mike,
my video, it's because the internet doesn't love me here, but take me away.
Yep, no problem. So we'll have Wendy.
And Joe, I saw that Mike unmuted himself too. Not to point you out, Mike, but
that's awesome.
I had a feeling.
No, with 3, it'll be even better with 3. So welcome, Melissa, Mike, and Wendy. I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm excited that you are interested in studying UDL through your practices with it's kind of a action research project in your classroom. So tell me a little bit about the middle school classroom. Do you teach math or science? So Mike, what about you? Do you teach math or science?
I'm a math teacher.
Math teacher. Okay, great. And how about you, Melissa? Are you a math or science teacher?
Can I be a special ed teacher that supports students in math?
Oh, I love that. Thanks, Melissa. I really
Mhm.
appreciate that because it's always good to have that additional perspective when we're doing our planning and thinking about what's going to be observable for all of our students in our classroom. And Wendy, how about you? Are you math or science?
I'm a science teacher.
Okay, great. So we have our math teacher, we have our special ed teacher, and we have our science teacher. So what I'd like to do first is think about your one team. So we're going to develop one academic rubric. And I know math and science has a lot in common. What are some things that you find in math and science that students generally need to develop over the course of an entire year? A skill or ability, something that you can see evidence of in your classroom? What are those things that you have seen in the past that students develop over the course of a year? Wendy?
I would say that it's the ability to maybe tackle different kinds of problems. Something that you could give them some kind of a system to identify different problems, especially story problems, as a physical science teacher. We do story problems about rocks falling and things rolling, and you have to be able to pick out the important information. That could be an academic skill that we want them to be able to do in terms that could cross over into math.
Yeah, Mike,
Yeah.
what do you think?
And to piggyback off of that, for a student or groups of students to be able to see a problem like that and then make their own plan and plan their own pathway out of a problem without having being told to do so.
Mm-hmm. And Missy, when you're supporting students that you work with in the math classroom, do you think that idea of being able to work their way through a problem, is that something that develops for them over the course of a year too?
Yeah, I would tie it into the math practice that relates to perseverance and sort of tackling the problem and sticking to it.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here real quick because I'm not going to put words into your mouth, but I want to give you a preview of how we want to record this here. So in the academic rubric, we want to put in a key academic focus area. I'm hearing a couple of things: perseverance. I'm hearing problem solving. What would you say you want to claim as your academic focus area?
Problem solving is totally fine for me.
Okay, does that work for you, Mike and Wendy?
Yes, that's a good one for me.
Yep.
Okay, great.
And I want to stop the simulation here. I have a question. So at this point, would we want to coach them more into like, how does this relate to the standard? Or is that kind of after this has been?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways I've gone about it. If I know that they're already aligned to a standard, I'll let them, just have the language themselves. And then I'll say, okay, let's dive into the standard and let's look for some focus criteria that are under problem solving that we can use that. Now, if they get way off base and they're just like, well, I want my kids to be able to raise their hand, or, okay, let's go to the standards and take a look at the math practices. So I really try to be responsive to what's happening. Now that we're paused actually in our role play, I want to go back to what I missed. As an observer, there is a mentoring the academic rubric development and facilitating the discussion about observation tool available in the tools page. As you watch this unfold, think about the sticking points that the team is experiencing and write down any mentoring questions that you might hear as we go through this process. Okay, let's get back into our role play role here. So great. So we have an academic rubric focus area, key focus area. Let's think about the criteria, those observable things. Like, I know my students are getting better at problem solving when I see this, either in their work or in what they're doing in the classroom. It looks like, feels like, sounds like, production wise. And a good place for us to look right now would be to those math practices. Missy, you brought that up, but let me jump over to the middle school math practices. And math practice 1, look at that, make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. So without even thinking about it, the standards must be so second nature to you folks as accomplished teachers. That's really great that you just keyed right into that. So as we look at this, what are some language pieces that we can pull out of here that, you know, over the course of the year, I would start seeing my students doing this?
I think a big part of problem solving is maybe inference making. I think that could be applied to both science and math if you're trying to deduce or break apart a problem.
Okay, Mike, can I ask you, if you were to observe inference making, what would I be seeing when you could say, yep, that student is making an inference? Or what would you be hearing? Or
well, in our school, we use the CPM math curriculum, so our students are very often, almost all the time, working in groups, working with their teams. So that's going to look like a team of 3 or 4 students talking together, potentially asking each other questions, or helping each other out with answers, and trying to make a plan together to get to the end solution.
okay, Wendy, does that seem like an observable criteria to you as students generating inferences?
Yeah. I mean, they would be, if you were going to do inferences, you'd want to see them or have them say, I see this piece and now I know that it's this. I don't know how they would put that into actionable, like things that you could see. Because necessarily if they're talking to each other doesn't, in my mind, necessarily mean that they're making inferences.
Okay.
Yeah, I could have.
I think it goes back to, sorry, I think it goes back to honing in on, like, if we use the language of the standards, the concept of identifying questions. And I think of that as students can identify questions, but that can also be scaffolded by the teacher supporting the students in creating a list of questions that could potentially advance them towards the specific problem. So identifying the questions, and then I guess then I'm trying to think about getting to the next piece, which I'm not a math teacher, by the way, so I'm just going to take me there in a reading world. But I would sort of ask the questions and then potentially hypothesize or make an educated guess as to what we suspect the answer may be. And I would think that that would be the concept of making sense of the problem, right? Like, I don't know if it's connected, but my next thing is, after I observe the questions, I'm going to sort of want to either make a prediction or a guess as to what the answer would be.
Okay, so you said something there, Missy, that I'm going to ask Wendy and Mike to decide whether it's something that would be really observable in their class. Making predictions. Is that important to your classrooms, Mike and Wendy? And would that be observable?
Yes.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so does that make sense to you? Does that work for you and the students that you work with too, Missy, that making predictions would be
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it can be scaffolded.
Okay,
right.
great.
So if they can't do that necessarily, if that's not natural to do on their own, certainly someone could prompt them to make a prediction.
Okay, great, great. All right.
As I'm looking at the math practices with my science lens, analyzing problem conditions and goals, translating, for example, verbal descriptions into equations, diagrams, graphs. So something you could look for in them problem solving, if you give them a story problem, are they drawing a picture? Are they making a graph? Are they somehow representing the verbal information into some kind of model? So that to me is like easy to see, right? So if I'm going to
the
give
modeling.
a story or it's an example, are they making some kind of model? And the only reason, like the reason this popped into my head is I was helping my daughter last night with math, and it was a story problem. And the first thing I said to her was, whenever I come across a story problem, I draw a picture. And I was like, and then that just hit me just now. Like, that's what we want our kids to do, is have a way of representing the verbal and numerical pieces into something that's a model.
What do you think about that, Mike?
100% agree.
Okay, and Missy, I heard you positively agree to that. Okay, I'm just gonna copy that and put that in here. Okay, we're not gonna do the other two, just in the the spirit of time here, but we would go through that process for 2 more focus criteria. So you can see it's really about us coming to a common agreement of how we can all have an opportunity to observe these focus criteria with our students in our classrooms. And then the second part of this is coming up with a set of rubric levels of 4, 3, 2, 1, and what that would look like. And there's lots of different examples of, 4 stages of proficiency. The one that is in the data collector is advanced, demonstrates in more than one way, proficient demonstrates in one way, developing demonstrates with prompting, beginning, unable to demonstrate, or above grade level, at grade level, near grade level, below grade level. Beyond there, almost there, not yet, secure, sufficient, emerging, limited. So a team would then go through the process of deciding which of those rubric level descriptors they want to use, and it's going to get attached to those 4, 3, 2, 1. And the way that we process the data in the end, and this is an important point when people are trying to decide what these levels are, each step between 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4 may not be able to be precisely determined. So in the end, when we look at the data, we want to move students from either a 1 or 2, so that 1 to 2 block that gets consolidated together, into a 3 or 4. So we're not using a process that's super precise, but we want to move them from those lower 2 levels into the upper 2 levels. So let's thank our volunteers for being part of that process for us. And I want to take an opportunity for the observers that were in watching from the outside of the fishbowl to share with us any coaching prompts that they saw, or any of the sticking points that you felt like the teachers might have gone through.
As far as coaching goes, it seemed like you were bringing them always back to the group. So making sure there was consensus among all of them, like, is this observable in yours and yours and your, in all classrooms, so that there was calibration on this. And I imagine if they would have said, I won't see that, then you would have popped that one out and started with something else.
Yep, that's right, Beth. Very good. Anything else that folks noticed?
Can I just ask a clarification question? When you're working with these teams, is the idea that they would be all grade levels because of the smallness of some of the districts? Like, if you're working with a 6th grade team, you're going to have the ELA teacher, you're going to have a math teacher working together. Is that the idea of trying to make connections between subjects?
Yeah, it's better to make connections between subjects rather than make connections between grades. So the subject piece will let you identify those 4 observable criteria. Now, a team can be 1 teacher. So if you don't have any other teachers for that teacher to be a team with, they can identify their own criteria. They can have their own data collector tool or their own instance of the My Impact app, their own team. And then their data gets consolidated can be consolidated with the other teams so that as a whole, we can look at the impact that we're having.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think also in some cases where you have the ability to have multiple teachers that perhaps share a content area, I'm just thinking about some of the teams we've worked with in the past. They did hone in on their subject area standards. So for example, the ELA team selected an ELA standard, a math team selected a math standard. So there is no one size fits all. It's really how to create the opportunity for that collaboration and collective efficacy to come out of the work.
And the toolkit does have a helpful tool that walks you through those different scenarios.
Right.
And how to coach that particular scenario. So Mike, what were you going to ask?
Yeah, just on the flip side of that, last year when I ran it in the high school, I had 8th grade all the way up through 11th grade teachers, and I had 1 in each of the 4 core areas. And there was a lot of power in that too. So I wouldn't be afraid of that because rather than honing in on specific like math or ELA standards, they really took a look at broader skills that we want all of our students to know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say being part of that, so I'm an English and special ed teacher by trade, so I have to admit that math and science conversation was stressing me out a little bit. But as I looked at it, like making predictions and creating that model, like creating a model in English or reading or whatever would be like a simple graphic organizer is another way of modeling that. So I, in this scenario, could even feel that reading language arts content knowledge sort of emerging into something that's observable. So I think just to dovetail on what Mike said, I certainly wouldn't shy away from it because it emerged naturally for me in that example.
Great, thank you for that.
I do know some teams have also kind of collected their thinking around disciplinary literacy. And what are those components that can really help us access the specific content in our subject areas?
Well, and for me, I was just thinking of the science practices because here you have science and math going together, but in like a high school situation, it might work. And I don't know if they're doing any high school trials because this would be awesome. As a former high school teacher, I'd love to do that. But like if you have your chemistry, your biology, your physics teacher, they're all going to be working on the science practices, and those things just themselves well to like even in the NGSS standards, they're written right there. That could be your benchmarks. But sorry, I'm just
no, and that's actually what we're doing in our chemistry thing is we're doing modeling. We have our 4 criteria underneath what we're looking for that. And so, yep, that is something that and we're talking about when we go across the year as well, it helps us practices, whether they be mathematical practices or science practices or the college readiness for English. As long as they're broken down in observables, we found it usable and useful.
Yeah, so you are all making just awesome connections because it is really those higher level skills that develop over the course of a whole year. And really, aren't they the skills that we want all students to develop as accomplished and expert learners? And it's not content specific. And we will just be enabling our students to be learners for the rest of their lives, expert learners for the rest of their lives, if we help them develop these large overarching skills that are transferable no matter where they go and no matter what they're learning. So I think we've shared a lot of what we're already going to be a model for us, but what other things from the model do you feel like you are going to be using when you help your team develop that academic rubric?
Hey, Joe, I just want to call your attention to the chat. Beth added a note in there.
Okay.
Yeah. It's yes.
Okay, let me see. So Beth asked, I'm assuming at an elementary level, the PLPs by grade level can choose content standards and overarching skills. Yep, absolutely.